The first known contact between the Imperium of Man and a previously unrecorded alien species occurred on the ocean world of TYRAN Primus, on the eastern fringe of Imperial space. Until that point, records indicated that the Imperium was entirely unaware of the emerging threat originating from the intergalactic void. If any of the galaxy's ancient intelligent species, such as the Eldari, were knowledgeable about the existence of the Tyranids, they chose not to warn humanity about the impending terror. TYRAN Primus was home to a small research station, tasked with conducting exploratory missions of new planets in the surrounding region. It was in the early stages of year 745 of Millennium 41 when scouting teams began to report troubling observations. Entire planets that were once lush and thriving with diverse alien life forms had been entirely stripped of all organic matter, leaving only barren rocks suspended in space. There was no trace of life, not even the simplest microorganisms. While this anomaly was reported to the Explorator General of the Adeptus Administratum, no immediate follow-up action was taken. The galaxy's vastness and its unresolved mysteries often led to long, bureaucratic delays. This situation was no different. As disturbing reports continued to emerge from the outpost on TYRAN about the discovery of a cluster of lifeless worlds, the Tyranid Hive Fleet Behemoth drew ever closer. The Tyranids had previously targeted only uninhabited planets, using the biological material they consumed to replenish their resources after the long journey through intergalactic space. With their numbers bolstered by these new organic stocks, the Tyranids descended upon TYRAN Primus with overwhelming force. This marked the first of many Imperial worlds to come under assault from the new Tyranid threat. The Mechanicus outpost on TYRAN received a stroke of luck that provided a warning of the impending onslaught. A survey vessel, returning from analysing another lifeless world, encountered a cloud of unidentified objects as it approached the TYRAN system's edge. Despite being damaged by what appeared to be organic mines on the fringe of the cloud, the exploratory ship managed to return to the Imperial base orbiting TYRAN Primus, bringing its dire message. Several solar days later, the full-scale invasion began. The central base on TYRAN Primus put up a fierce resistance against the relentless invaders. Given TYRAN's position on the galaxy's dangerous frontier, it was fortified and garrisoned with a military presence deemed sufficient to repel most hostile threats. The Tyranids, however, were a threat the Imperium was ill prepared for. In addition to the Imperial forces, a cluster of immense planetary defense lasers safeguarded the outpost. Each laser was shielded by robust ceramite silos and void shield generators. The base's firepower was further bolstered by 36 autocannon and lascannon turrets, forming an intricate network of defensive structures and Proteus-class bunkers. The Imperial garrison stationed on TYRAN Primus was a force to be reckoned with. Alongside the cybernetic Skitarii bodyguards of the Adeptus Mechanicus commander, Magos Varnak, TYRAN boasted 3 wings of the Imperial Navy's Thunderbolt fighters, 3 Endeavour-class light cruisers, and an entire regiment of Astra Militarum infantry. This assembly was standard for a crucial Imperial outpost on the frontier, proven effective against most adversaries encountered by isolated Imperial troops on the galactic fringes. However, against the ravenous hunger of the Tyranids, this garrison would ultimately prove to be only a temporary impediment. The planetary defense lasers on TYRAN sprang to life as soon as the first alien bioships entered the world's orbit. For more than an hour, the stormy skies of TYRAN were repeatedly lit up by colourful bursts of focused energy as the base's gunners fought desperately to repel the descending alien invaders. Just as the defense lasers began to overheat from the sheer volume of targets, the invading Tyranids retreated. Magus Varnak, filled with overconfidence in his forces and unaware of the true extent of the threat, ordered his small fleet of Imperial Navy cruisers to pursue the withdrawing bioships. This decision would prove to be a grave mistake. Once the Imperial starships broke through the spore cloud concealing the true size of the approaching alien fleet, they realized that only a handful of the strange organic spacecraft had been destroyed out of the thousands present in the invading fleet that had entered TYRAN's system. Having successfully drawn the Imperial cruisers away from the protection of the planet's defense laser emplacements, the bioships suddenly altered course and descended upon the Imperial vessels like hungry predators. The Emperor's Fist was the first Imperial starship to fall, torn apart by voracious swarms of organisms released by a much smaller vessel. The Righteous Destiny met a similar fate as a cluster of grasping tentacles dragged it into the gaping maw of a larger hive ship. Only the Sword of Warriors survived long enough to transmit a warning back to the defenders at the outpost. However, before the message was complete, leech-like pseudopods breached the starship's adamantium hull plates, and a horde of vicious gene-stealers swarmed the spacecraft's bridge and lower decks. The entire crew was slaughtered within minutes, leaving the cruiser adrift in space, its precious biomatter dissolved into the Hive Fleet reserves. With the Imperial cruisers lost, the Hive Fleet returned to orbit around TYRAN, and this time the Imperial defences proved insufficient. Thousands of mycetic spores rained down onto the world. While defence lasers managed to destroy many of the descending pods, countless others crashed into the stormy seas. All around the Imperial outpost, the waters churned as the invaders burst forth from their spores and mercilessly overpowered TYRAN's oceanic predators, which were no match for the savagery of the Tyranids. The Tyranid bioforms began to scale the walls of the Imperial outpost. They were initially repelled with disciplined laser volleys from the Imperial guardsmen, who pushed the voracious creatures back, aided by veteran guardsmen from the jungle-covered death world of Catachan, who were accustomed to battling similar monstrous fauna. Despite the constant rain, the guardsmen's firepower created significant gaps in the alien ranks. The smaller bioforms had limited protection against the concentrated lasgun fire, and were no match for the autocannon arrays encircling the base. Wave after wave of Hormigants and Gene-Stealers were torn apart, their corpses obstructing the designated kill zones between the outpost bastions. Thunderbolt fighters patrolled the skies, eliminating incoming spores with precision fire before moving on to new targets, although there were always more threats to contend with. The situation was bleak, but the Imperial defenders were holding. Things would change, however, when the Northern Planetary Defense Laser ceased firing. Thousands of gargoyles willingly sacrificed themselves, clogging the massive beam projectors with their own bodies on the hive mind's orders. Shortly after, the Eastern Planetary Defense Laser was obliterated when a Carnifex breached its steel walls and ruptured the weapon's coolant lines. Despite their heroic efforts, the Thunderbolts eventually fell from the skies, their engines choked by spores, or their pilots violently removed from their cockpits by harpies. As the Imperial defense network collapsed, mycetic spores started landing directly onto the outpost itself. And just an hour later, the Imperial outpost on TYRAN Primus had been completely overwhelmed. The fortified structures had either been demolished or overrun, and all of the planetary defense lasers had fallen silent. Even the battle-hardened Catachan jungle fighters of the Astra Militarum had reluctantly abandoned their posts, seeking refuge in the relentless rain to escape an inevitable and gruesome fate. Only the command bunker remained standing, and its walls began to fracture and crack under the relentless assault of larger Tyranid bioforms. Magos Varnak, through the few operational displays left, witnessed the unstoppable onslaught of the Xenos invaders that had overrun his once impregnable outpost. When the adamantium gate of the bunker was finally breached, the Tyranids flooded into the command center. Imperial guardsmen and cybernetic Skitarii fought valiantly with flamers and in some instances their bare hands. However, the overwhelming numbers of ferocious aliens managed to advance, hacking, biting and clawing their way forward. As Hormagaunts poured into the command center, Varnak uttered his final prayer to the Omnissiah and activated a special switch, sending a data codex plummeting into the depths of what remained of the outpost before it was torn apart. This invaluable data stored within this codex would become the TYRAN outpost's enduring legacy. Its visual, pictorial and data records of the initial Tyranid assault would be recovered nearly a full year later by Inquisitor Cryptman. Cryptman would later dedicate his life countering the Tyranid threat to humanity. Without Cryptman's intervention, the fate of TYRAN Outpost might have remained unknown, and the Imperium would have been utterly unprepared for the impending catastrophe. Cryptman encountered a barren, lifeless planet that bore no resemblance of a once thriving ocean world it had begun. The planet had been completely drained and stripped of all life, with every trace of vegetation and even its water resources consumed by the Tyranid Hive Fleet for essential biomass and nutrients. As Cryptman reviewed the data codex recovered from the outpost's ruins, he was confronted with the grim reality of the initial Tyranid assault. Without hesitation, the Inquisitor left the haunting remains of TYRAN behind, determined to warn the galaxy about the approaching of the Great Devourer, a terror that Cryptman subsequently named the Tyranids, after the first Imperial world they had devoured. The nightmare of the Tyrannic Wars had begun.